I love Monster Hunter. I could not even begin to describe just how hyped I am for Monster Hunter Wilds, and it's only a few months away. February? Really? That's so soon. Oh my god. Now, I have been a big fan of Monster Hunter ever since I first played it back in high school, and I've played every mainline game since. Alongside games like Deep Rock, Pokemon, Team Fortress 2, and all of those, Monster Hunter has always managed to stick with me all this time without ever getting stale for me. As a game that started off as a rather niche title outside of Japan, Monster Hunter has bloomed into one of Capcom's flagship series, sporting an impressively large player base and a library of beloved titles, and some not so beloved. With every new title, there's a new innovation, new gameplay gimmicks to keep us playing, trying out new weapons and hunting new monsters. With the release of Monster Hunter World back in 2018, those doors have swung wide open for everyone and anyone to be able to pick up the game series and learn to love it too. And so I find myself asking once again, why? Why do people love this game as much as they do? What has Capcom done to make the game more accessible, more exciting for new players to the franchise? And what have they done to keep the veterans coming back? Much like I did with the Deep Rock video, I consulted the Monster Hunter Reddit page for feedback, and I took even more care to read through all the responses in that thread to gather as much information as I could as to why people love Monster Hunter as much as they do. It's my hope that through this video, that not only can I find and share some answers as to why, but to do those people justice in expressing the love they have for the series. That's why I wanted to start making these videos after all, to analyze and explore why people like the things that they do. So enough preamble, let's begin the hunt. Monster Hunter is a series where you hunt monsters. Alright, easy joke there. But there's more to it than that. Monster Hunter could be described as a hack-and-slash strategy adventure game, where you are tasked with hunting various different monsters. Think of it like a game composed entirely of boss fights. During hunts, you'll have to gather resources from different nodes found in nature, slaying smaller beasts and skinning them for resources, and even skinning the bodies of larger monsters you've set out to hunt in the first place. All through doing so, are you able to craft new items, weapons, and armor to further progress in the story. Yeah, these games actually do have stories, in fact. A lot of them are structured very similarly. A monster is wreaking havoc on a nearby village and you, the titular hunter, are set out to stop it. Eventually you kill off whatever the flagship monster of the week is, only to find out that the horrible things that have been going on are caused by another monster, typically like a god. Then you go fight them. Okay, nobody ever said the Monster Hunter games were renowned for their storytelling. You don't really need a good reason to go up against some badass looking beasties. The gameplay loop itself can be something of a grind, especially in older titles. If you want to build armor from a certain monster, you're gonna want materials, so you'll have to hunt that monster. Sometimes you'll have to hunt for rare parts, which only have a certain percent of showing up. Only if you manage to accomplish certain things like booting a certain part on a monster or severing its tail, and then that good old-fashioned desire sensor is gonna know that you're looking for that specific part, and well, shit, you didn't get it. Time to repeat the process all over again. Now, Ume, I hear you say, you aren't making this game sound particularly fun, and it isn't for a lot of people. Hunts in Monster Hunter typically have a time limit set at 50 minutes, and it's not uncommon for people who are fresh to the game to hit that time limit and fail the quest from time to time. But the grinding aspect is a big component as to why people love the game. Not the grinding of the materials, though some people do enjoy that, but learning about the monsters. Learning their behaviors, attack patterns, what elements they're weak to, where they're weak to getting hit. Learning your weapon, your weapon's capabilities, what its strengths and weaknesses are, how you're gonna hit a monster in a certain area to be able to wound or trip it. Personally, I'm partial to the hammer. It doesn't have a lot of range, it's very nimble for a heavy weapon, and focusing on the head can lead to a monster becoming exhausted or even knocked out for a period of time so you and your teammates can wail on it. Unfortunately, you can't cut tails with it and you aren't able to reach monsters that are high up in the air without some use of items, but its strengths outweigh its weaknesses for me personally. Learning the intricacies of fighting each and every monster, it's like a dance. It's like learning a matchup in a fighting game. Only through repetition can you teach yourself to become the best at something. It's easy enough to want to mash your buttons and hope for the best, but if you want to get good at Monster Hunter, you have to take the time to learn. Be patient. Be observant. Remember, you got 50 minutes to any hunt. Try to make the most of it by actively learning. In an interview by Vice.com with Monster Hunter World producer Ryozo Sugimoto and executive director / art director Kanami Fujioka, when asked about the process of designing a new monster, Fujioka had this to say. We have a framework for what kind of monster is going to be needed at each state of the game. They all have a different role to play. In the early stages of the game, they need a tutorial monster, so to speak, to show you this is what it's like to hunt a monster. What wouldn't be appropriate at the start of the game is a monster that needs you to pull out every tool in your deck. You need to gradually get better at this game as you keep playing. I can't just be attacking all the time in this game. I need to remember that there are useful tools that I can use, whether it's trapping or so forth. This game doesn't have a traditional EXP system. The experience you gain is entirely dependent on your ability to play the game effectively. You could sit with pals and let them grind out fights for you so you can get the materials for stronger weapons and armor. That is, if the game didn't actively lock you from fighting tougher monsters at certain ranks if your rank is too low. Yep, sorry, you gotta play the game. And I'm saying that this is to the game's benefit. Again, this game doesn't have levels per se. Both the offline story mode and the online multiplayer mode have different ranks of difficulty, and you have to complete set key quests in any given rank to be able to take on an urgent quest, so that you can move on to the next rank. Monster Hunter actively pushes you to do more and learn more, so you can get better and thus progress through the game. The older titles aren't exactly hand-holdy. They're downright, what's the opposite of hand-holdy? Trial by fire. But the newer games work to rectify this, with the bulk of the early game story mode acting as something of a tutorial for the player to learn the different mechanics of the game and learn how to traverse the game's various biomes. And I'd say it does a very good job of that, especially in World. In Monster Hunter World, the concept of scout flies are introduced, so instead of relying on luck or prior knowledge to stumble upon the monster during your hunt, you can take the time to look for tracks and actually, hunt the monster. It's an obvious yet interesting gameplay decision that, albeit divisive for some, I find to be helpful overall. It's one of many things that make Monster Hunter World so accessible to new players. Hell, despite the fact that World could be considered the 5th game in the series, it's overall a large-scale reboot to the formula. There's still strategy involved, but a different kind. World takes many quality of life steps to ensure that just about anybody who's capable can learn how to play the game. Where older Monster Hunter games are stiff and clunky in a lot of ways, World is a lot more fluid and freeform. There's merit to be had with both. Both games encourage methodical thinking, movement, trap planting, all important aspects to becoming a good hunter. World does it in such a way that is really much more accessible and a lot more easy to understand. This isn't to, shit on the old formula, because I really am a huge fan of the older games, but a lot of players got their start with World in part because of that accessibility, and some have fallen in love with the series so much that they even bothered to visit the older games released before. I started with Try on the Wii with the Wiimote and Nunchuck. That game was so hard. I didn't know better than the motion controls made the game hell, but I loved it anyways. But I digress. When I truly understood I loved Monster Hunter was the first time I got the quest to fight Anjanath in World. I had my system in my theater and my 100-inch screen. I was running through the jungle scared as fuck, knowing that in 3 or 4 hits I would be dead. I needed to avoid every attack and hit the giant mutant T-Rex hundreds of times. My chest was so tight, my jaw clenched, even my toes curled. I was so full of stress. Then after my 3rd try, I was victorious. Jumping up and down, I was so excited. The game is a roller coaster, thrills and scares and an adrenaline rush that no other game delivers. Monster Hunter has ruined 99% of the games for me because nothing gives me that hit of adrenaline like Monster Hunter does. I'm hooked, and I don't want the cure. It probably goes without saying, but a big reason why people love Monster Hunter is due to its, well, monsters. Specifically their monster design, not just how fun they are to fight. Ask anyone who plays Monster Hunter and they'll likely be able to tell you who their favorite monster is, what game they're from, what they love about them. Hell, they probably own a plush of them or a figurine somewhere. My favorite monsters are Zinogre and Nargacuga, among others. Capcom is no stranger to borrowing inspiration from real-world creatures and mythology to help develop monsters for their game. Rise specifically borrows a lot of inspiration from Japanese yokai, almost blatantly so. Aknasom is based on a Kasa Okabe, or umbrella ghosts. Tetranodon are based on Kappa. Magnamalo, the flagship for Rise, is clearly based off of Samurai, but its purple aura is meant to draw a parallel to Onibi, or ghost lights. Even older monsters like Zinogre borrow inspiration from Japanese folklore, being something of a wolf raiju or beast of thunder. There are a number of scans of Dive into Monster Hunter, a book series detailing the designs of just about every monster in the series. Sadly, these books haven't been fully translated from Japanese, but there are a few posts on Reddit detailing some of the information on a few of the monsters. The amount of detail is impressive here. measurements, behaviors, ecology. And that's another thing, the ecology videos. Each time you encounter a new monster in the game, you're treated to a small cutscene showing off that monster for the first time. Its behavior, hunting patterns, how it reacts to intruders. So much is detailed over the course of a few seconds to maybe a minute or two. Such things like this really make the world feel alive and lived in. Like this is a believable world that existed long before you had any involvement in it. The term imaginative realism is used a lot when describing Monster Hunter's world, and it could not be more apt. There are plenty of other videos that go over the topic better than I ever could, so I'll go ahead and link those in the description. In essence though, Monster Hunter is a fantasy themed series, but its creatures and world are based in a sense of realism, resulting in, again, the suspension of disbelief that these monsters could actually exist. The idea of monsters as a concept really is deeply ingrained into our everyday culture if you really think about it. From the deep myths of dragons and other fairy tale creatures to foreign mythology to things like Godzilla and King Kong, Monster Hunter draws a lot of parallels from existing myths and legends and creates creatures that fit into the world so perfectly that helps carry that suspension of disbelief. Monsters thriving in their own habitats and interacting with other creatures. It's really beautiful. It's really something. You take a step back and look at it. I've always been drawn into creature and environmental designs in games and books. As a growing child that loves Pokemon, I kept looking for more, although my family really couldn't afford a new console every time a new model comes out. But I was lucky enough to receive a PSP. At that time, I didn't really know what I could play, but a couple of friends introduced me to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. I fell in love immediately as I could get a lot more close up to the monsters. It was the greatest time in my grade school years, as I was also introduced to God Eater at the time. It also fuels my creativity that made me try and make concepts for what kind of monster a Monster Hunter game could have. From then until now, it's been a ritual for me that whenever I encounter a new monster, I don't fight it. Instead, just observe it for several minutes, then restart the quest to do it properly. I take in every detail of the design that I could, watching how it moves and interacts with its surroundings and other monsters, especially with World where it's a lot more prominent. But it's not enough to take a regular creature and slap a bunch of fantastical elements onto it. Each monster is given deep and careful consideration when it comes to its design and biology. Let's use Barioth as an example. A rather large monster in size, very clearly inspired by a saber-toothed tiger mixed with some other sorts of big cats. Combining contractions of its cryosac with lung exhalation creates a strong spiral flow that creates a tornado-shaped ice torrent as it hits the ground. It has better flight than other quadrupedal flying wyverns, but not as good as Rathalos. Its blade-like amber fangs are unique to Barioth and designed for both deep bites and slashing through thick fur and fat. It uses its claws to kill prey normally, and if the prey is too huge, it uses its fangs on the throat to induce blood loss. All these and more are notes that come directly from the Iceborne ecology book written as part of the Dive into Monster Hunter series. And this is just scratching the surface. The book even goes into what role it plays in the story and how the mother Barioths raise their young. It just goes to show how much Capcom cares when developing its world and the creatures that live in it, and that love and care is appreciated by players and observers alike. I know I'd mentioned earlier in the video that Monster Hunter isn't really well known for having especially deep stories, but there is a great amount of effort that goes into the world building. Not just with its characters and monsters, but how the humans and other races in this world interact with them. The Monster Hunter world is incredibly interwoven with its own mythology, with new legends being told in every single game. There are a number of different cultures to be experienced, languages to be spoken, locales to be seen, and the level of detail is ridiculous. Capcom actually drew a lot of inspiration from Studio Ghibli's films, and it shows. They were actually inspired in large part by films like Jurassic Park and even Indiana Jones of all things. Monster Hunter stories focus primarily on working with nature, how regular people manage to fit in a world where they otherwise shouldn't, how they adapt, how they fit into the ecosystem, what their role is. These are all important facts made known in each story. Monster Hunter World, of course, puts an even bigger focus on this, with your hunter and many others venturing into the new world, trying to find their place in it and put a stop to the march of a great elder dragon terrorizing the landscape and driving the monsters crazy, only to find out later that they have bitten off more than they could chew. Nevertheless, they persist, as is human nature. There's an old real-world hunter's philosophy that exists that dictates that no part of an animal should go unused. Such is also the case in Monster Hunter. Now, you think with a name like that, you'd spend the majority of the game just bashing monsters to death willy-nilly, But it's so much more than that. Quests are sent out in regards to monsters running amok. Monsters that need to be put down for the sake of preservation. Sometimes there's a caravan looking for help that just wishes for a pesky predator to be taken care of. Monsters will occasionally be seen venturing out of their designated habitat, often due to being ousted by some force beyond their control, and will pose a risk to the creatures currently inhabiting it. As a hunter, your job is to put a stop to that and to preserve the peace. No creature is hunted out of ill will. And that's something I've always kind of appreciated about the Monster Hunter series, is that on the surface it looks very basic. Like, you are just hunting monsters for the sake of hunting them. Why else would you call it Monster Hunter? But like I said, it's deeper than that. There's a philosophy behind everything that you do. You have the different organizations in the game with their different goals and objectives on helping the world grow and making it a better place for everybody, not just themselves, but the monsters that they inhabit the world with. It's easy to want to draw parallels to Pokemon, which is also a very surface level game. Go catch Pokemon. Why? Because they're there. I mean, why not? You want to be a Pokemon master, right? Monster Hunter isn't like, go hunt all the monsters. Why? Because you want to be the Monster Hunter master or whatever. Though I guess there also is Monster Hunter Stories, which is basically Capcom's take on Pokemon with the Monster Hunter formula. But the fact that Capcom takes enough care to expand upon the world beyond a very basic level is something that I and a lot of other players should appreciate. At the end of the day, it's not about killing monsters just for the sake of killing or grinding up experience to kill even bigger monsters. It's about maintaining the peace, about maintaining structure, about finding your place in the world and making a difference. I know I'm probably waxing poetic at this point, but again, I really do appreciate this amount of thought and care has been put into the world of Monster Hunter. It makes things feel so much more deep. I've spent a lot of time talking about other people's reasons for liking Monster Hunter, but this is my video after all. I felt compelled to share some personal takes on the series, things that I didn't see anybody else in the Reddit thread comment on. My introduction to the Monster Hunter series through that of Monster Hunter Try on the Wii. I was visiting a friend's house when I walked into his room and he was fighting the final boss of that game, Ceadeus? How the fuck do you pronounce that? This thing. I remember being absolutely blown away by what I was seeing. Fighting a monster on its own turf, underwater with crazy epic music playing in the background during the whole thing. It's like nothing I'd ever seen before. Maybe it was because I was a Pokemon kid, but I felt compelled by the notion of fighting monsters one-on-one instead of taking the time to capture them. Funny enough, Capcom did dip their toes into this formula with Monster Hunter Stories, which I actually find to be a pretty good entry point to the series. Unfortunately, that game didn't exist when I was younger, so I picked up Monster Hunter Try, splurged on a classic controller, grabbed my hammer, and decided to give it a shot. And I got fucking creamed. I was immediately discouraged by just how bad I was at the game. My initial roadblock was the low rank Rathian and the swamp level. Low rank. Like the easiest rank in the game. The game was far too difficult for me and I was having such a hard time grasping it. But my friends pushed me to keep playing and they eventually had to carry me through that fight, but I decided enough was enough. I practiced the fight on my own countless times, started bringing flash bombs with me when it was in the air so I could knock it down, cut off its pesky tail, which was so fucking cathartic, let me tell you. And before long, I learned the fight. I started applying that logic to every monster I met, and while I wouldn't consider myself an expert by any means, I'm glad I pushed through that and taught myself to learn instead of giving up, because the payoff was so great. Monster Hunter is a series that deserves every single bit of success and recognition. In a gaming landscape that is still rife with shooters and gacha and the like, I find Monster Hunter to be a refreshing series to return to time and time again. With its deep and rewarding gameplay, consistent free updates, and the expansion passes and Iceborne and Sunbreak that add higher difficulty hunts for more complex monster fights. It's a simple game, true to its name, but the amount of love and care that goes in developing its world, ecology, and improving its gameplay, It's a series that so many people have fallen in love with, and I want to help spread that joy if I can. I'm so excited to play Monster Hunter Wilds. I want to take the time to share what I love with others and hopefully convince people to pick up the series and develop their own love for it. For those of you who play Monster Hunter, I'd love to hear you share your experiences. Comment down below what monster you could fight before this video ended. Are you as excited for Wilds as I am? Let me know, and I hope to see you in the next video. Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. I'm very happy with how it came out. This is my third one, so I feel like I'm improving somewhat. Hopefully you liked the video though. I very much appreciate it. If you are interested, I do have a Twitch channel and I am planning on playing Monster Hunter Wilds as soon as it comes out, so be sure to check that out. Thanks again. Yeah, thank you.